So I have a microphone tucked next to you both. So I'm going to turn this up. First, I'm going to do the little intro, little facts.
Is that green button on now for you?
Yes.
Great. Okay. Hi, everyone. Hi, I'm Maggie, representing Flyleaf tonight. Thanks for coming and supporting your local independent bookstore and purchasing your book through us, because that's what makes these things happen. So supporting local, shopping local, that keeps jobs in the community. We really appreciate you coming here and doing that sort of thing. So thank you so much. Tonight we are thrilled to be launching Sarah Dessen's new book, Change of Plans, with Angela Velez. Your book is already signed, but we'll hold the signing line in the main part of the store after the talk for folks who want to have a chance to meet Sarah and get their book personalized. Sarah Dessen is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of over a dozen novels for teens, including The Truth About Forever, Just Listen, and This Lullaby. Her work has been published in over 30 countries and sold millions of copies worldwide. She is the recipient of the 2017 Margaret A. Edwards Award from the American Library Association for Outstanding Contribution to Youth Adult Literature. Angela Velez is the author of Lulu and Milagros' Search for Clarity and Tangled Roots and Wild Dreams. She grew up in Baltimore under the watchful eye of her Peruvian immigrant parents and now teaches creative writing at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. She lives in Durham with her mountains of quilting fabric, 2 plastic flamingos, and 1 wobbly disco ball. We hope you enjoy the event. Thanks again, and remember you can buy extra copies of Change of Plans and other books by Sarah up front after the reading if you don't already have multiple copies. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Hi. It's your book party. It's my book party. Is this working? I guess so. Yes. This is so nice. Oh, here comes my family. Rolling into the top. This is so nice. Like every time I do an event at Flyleaf, I'm completely distracted because like one of my best friends from high school is back there and then another one of my best friends is sitting right next to her. So, it's very emotional. But thank you all so much for coming out. This is really fun, and it's always the best way to kick off a book tour. And I'm so grateful to Angela, whose new book is coming out on June 16th, and is really, really good. If you like plants and flowers in particular, you need to check out this book because it's got a whole theme of growth in it, right?
It's true. And this feels wild. It's really an honor. I told myself I wouldn't get emotional or cry up here just to think like my teenage self is here chatting with you, someone I read you growing up, I read you still now. The book is incredible. I'm so excited for all of you to get a chance to read it. But to start, I thought, could you give us a pitch about the book in your own words?
Oh my goodness. Well, really this book is about everything not going the way that you thought it was going to go, which I think the older I get, the more I realize that is what happens more often than not. So it's basically about a girl named Finley, and as the book begins, she's graduating from high school. She's got her boyfriend. They're going off to school together in the fall. She's got it all laid out. She knows exactly what's going to happen. And then, as often does, the universe has other plans, and things kind of blow up in her face. And she ends up having a totally different summer than she expected to have. She goes with her mom at the last minute to her mom, who she doesn't know very well, who she didn't grow up with, down to Eastern, in my mind it's North Carolina, I don't think it's specified in the book, Eastern, to a lake town where she spends the summer and discovers all this stuff about her mom and also about herself. So that's the pitch. I don't have the pitch down yet because I've just started doing the event. But by the end of this tour, I will have it down. It'll be much faster than that.
Okay, so I think we have to start at the beginning. Right. You have these incredible names for your characters. Where does Finley come from?
Oh, gosh, I don't even know. I wrote this book actually sort of pre-pandemic or right after the pandemic. So I must have seen something that sort of jumped out at me. I love a last name as a first name in a lot of ways. And to me, Finley, I think, when I was growing up, we didn't have a lot of people with that unusual names as we do now, although my friend Athea is here and she always had the most unusual name of anybody I knew. But so I've always liked a last name as a first name. So usually the name is the last thing I need before I start writing. Like when that comes, I know that I have the character, but I can't remember where Finley came from. But like I said, it's been 7 years, you guys, since I've been up here. So, my memory's not as good as it used to be. I wrote this book 7 years ago, probably. So, it's
Or she's always been there.
Yes, exactly.
That's also a beautiful way of thinking about it. So, Finley, I don't think this is a spoiler. She's reeling from a major change in plans. Her boyfriend has just dumped her at sea. That's my favorite line in the book. When you wrote this character, how much inspiration came from your own change in plans?
Well, I got broken up with by someone that I was very attached to, and my first true love, in the end of my beginning of senior year of high school. And so it was devastating, and it took me, so I always wanted to write about that experience. I always wanted to write about what it feels like to sort of have your heart broken, and still have to get up and go to school and do all the things that you need to do. And yeah, it's not so much of a spoiler because but I love the idea, I think, especially with a girl like Finley, who's really defined herself around her boyfriend and, decided what college she was going to go to based on where he was going. And she had another school that she wanted to go to, but she decided she didn't want to be away from him, which I see your face like, we don't do that, no, if it's meant to last, it will last. So, I totally forgot the question that you played. I wanted to write about sort of when everything falls out from under you, because honestly, that's sort of, in some ways, what happened to me. When my last book came out, I had this new publisher, I had this 3-movie deal with Netflix, I was like, I'm good. I'm just going to go out and talk about the other books and ride this wave. And, we had one really good movie come out on Netflix, but then that whole thing fell apart. And then I parted ways with my publisher, and then there was a pandemic and everything stopped. And so I found myself in a totally different place than I thought I was going to be. So I really drew from that. I was working on this book when all that started to happen. But then as I was going through and revising, I could really pull from that.
And thinking about pulling in so many voices, I was really struck by the women of this book. I kept thinking it's like a coven, but it has breakfast sandwiches and antiques, and they're very practical.
Right.
And so I was curious, as you were developing the aunts and the cousins and the friends, were there side characters that really stuck out to you that you kind of wanted to hold on to?
Well, I always like the side characters in many ways, more even than the narrators, because you can do so much more with a side character. You can have a side character be really quirky and weird and give them all of these characteristics that as a narrator, you kind of need your narrator to have both feet on the ground. And my next book, which is coming out a year from now, when I was working on it, initially my narrator was really unlikable because she was so fun to write is really unlikable. And my editor was like, everyone's going to hate this girl. So I think I need to make a side character more like her. But it's a lot of fun with the other characters. And I think the family in particular, I come from a really big family and we spent summers together in houses near water, so I could draw really easily from that. And, it's interesting with the narrative, Finley's right at the age where it turned for me. I don't know if it's like this with your family, but when I was growing up and hanging out with my extended family, it was all like one thing, and it was all so mystical and wonderful, and we all had these stories, and we all sang the songs, and it was all great. And then when you get to a certain age, you start finding out the truth about things, like certain dirt and things that people that you thought were one way are not that way. And I used to say the difference was before I was 18, if I walked into a room, my mom and my aunts would stop talking. And after I was 18, they'd just keep talking, And so I was really interested in that too. Like when you have a big family, it's so, it's so fun and it's so wonderful to have all these people, but more people means more conflict and more possibilities for people to be scrapping a little bit. So that was really appealing to me as well.
Graduating to the gossip table.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
it
takes
table.
a little while. Yeah.
So at the onset of the novel, Finley doesn't know her mom very well, and her mom is keeping some catastrophic secrets from her. In the past, you've written mothers and daughters who have a lot of tension and baggage, but we have two characters who are sort of figuring out what does it mean to be mother and daughter. So what was it like writing that, and how has writing about mothers and daughters changed now that you have a teen daughter?
Yes, yeah, I have an 18-year-old, so it's interesting because this book starts with Finley graduating from college, and from high school. My daughter's graduating from high school in like a month. So it's interesting, like the mother and daughter thing. I've done so many, this is my 15th book, and I've done a lot of stuff with mothers and daughters, and you're always looking for something that's a little bit different, and as a writer, you want something that you haven't done before. So what I really like about Finley and Kat, her mom, is that her mom really wasn't that present. Her mom took off when she was about 4 and sort of went to pursue her career, and Finley was raised by her dad and then her stepmom. And now she has step siblings and everything. But I loved the idea of getting to know your mother, like really getting to know your mother when you're both adults rather than, because our moms have such a history of us, as children. Your mom always knows all this stuff. They know you before you knew you, before you had that awareness. It's like everyone, all your family telling these embarrassing stories about you from when you were little, like, oh, you used to run around naked, and all that kind of stuff. But I love the idea of Finley getting to know Kat sort of as an adult, like we're both grown-ups now, and the things that you seeing your mother as an actual person, which I think is hard to do often when you're a teenager, and sometimes it takes until you're older to be like, wow, and I think it definitely changed. You can see it in my books because I think Along for the Ride was the first book that I wrote right after Sasha was born, and so there's a lot of babies in that and everything. But before that, the moms were always like, oh, that mom is so strict and she's so hard on her, and why is she being so difficult? And then I got to the point where I was like, well, of course she doesn't want you to get into that car with that boy, like this is ridiculous. And so, I worry about that actually, like how much longer, am I still in any kind of position to be writing about high school? Because I'm very far from high school to the point that I have a high schooler of my own. But I think the key is to sort of stick to what is universal about it and more timeless, and not try to keep up with. And one thing I have happen, which I've seen other people do in books and movies, is Finley she throws her phone in the lake, but she's without a phone for a lot of the book. And that was a conscious choice, because I think otherwise you really have to do a lot with, especially with teens, with texts and, social media and everything. And so the idea of sort of being without that was really intriguing to me as a writer too.
So thinking about timeless, I think there's nothing more timeless than like a perfect scene where the dialogue is just clicking, and this book is full of so many of those scenes. It's beautiful, it's zingers, it's compliments, it's advice, it's grudges. Did you have a process for weaving all of these voices together? Is there a lot of dialogue that ends up on the chopping block? Like, what's the writing process like?
Oh, the writing process is rough, always. And the Flyleaf people here can tell you, I call them my emotional support bookstore in the acknowledgments of this book. But I would come in here, I do a lot of my writing over at the Root Cellar, and I would come in here and just kind of unload on them and everything. I do like the dialogue the best. I love nothing more than a scene where you have a bunch of people around a table and everybody's talking at once. I think that's really, really fun. But the writing has always been hard for me. That's the thing. And I try to be really honest about that. Angela teaches at UNC. I taught at UNC for many years. And I think as a writer, I always want to hear that it's hard for other people too, that it's not just me, And I remember we had a visiting writer at UNC one time, and she was, I'm not going to say who it was, she was incredibly well known and had won all these awards and everything. And I took my class to see her talk, and I raised my hand and I was like, what do you want to say to struggling writers? We want to have some writers here with me. And she was like, oh, I don't struggle, The muse sings and I write, and I was just like, oh, shut up. Nobody wants to hear that, So I try to be really honest. I mean, I'm editing the next book right now, and it's really hard. And you would think I would know what I'm doing after, 15 times. But no, it's always hard. It's always a leap of faith every day, sitting down. I wish I was one of those people that could really know. I don't start a book until I have what I call my skeleton, which is first scene, climactic scene, last scene, and first line. And the character's name comes first, but then I don't start until I have that, because I've learned that if you start without that, you get to like 200 pages and nothing has happened. Like literally my agent has called me and said, I'm on page 200 and nothing, is something gonna happen soon? Which is not the call you wanna get, But it leaves room. I mean, I know people who outline and sort of plot chapter by chapter, and I've never been able to do that. I wanna have enough room to follow something if something fun comes up, because sometimes somebody comes in on page 75 that's more interesting than anybody that's been there already, so it's every day. I mean, I write every day. Honestly, my writing schedule came out from when this Lucha Tigre used to be the Flying Burrito. Anybody? It's old school Chapel Hill. Thank you. It's the Flying Burrito. Rest in peace, Phil. We missed you. So I worked at the Burrito, and I also worked for Lee Smith, who a lot of people know also. I worked for Lee as an assistant, and so in the morning I worked for Lee, and in the evenings I worked at the Burrito, and in the afternoons was the only time I could write. So I really trained myself that was when I wrote, and that's the same time that I write now, because I am a creature of habit. But I try to write every day. I think the discipline is a big part of it. And I throw away a lot, which is, I mean, I don't literally throw it away because I always have for every book, I have a cuts folder, which I just throw everything into that I delete because you just never know. Something may pop out of it. But, I try to be honest about it. I'm terrified about the next book. And then I'm even more terrified about the one after that because it's not finished yet. So we're trying not to think about that right now. Just trying to be in the moment and enjoy this.
Lisa Coe has this concept of compost, where everything you take ends up in compost. It's not gone forever. It could grow into something different, but that makes the cutting and the throwing away a little less.
And sometimes, my book Dreamland came out of another book that I was writing that was not for teens, and I just had this one section, and I threw it away, put it in a file, and then I was like, ooh, that's kind of interesting. Maybe I'll go back to that. So you never know. The worst is when you spend, and I know writers here can appreciate, I spent the whole day the other day writing a scene that then the next day I deleted, which I was just like, this is just such a waste of time. But I knew as soon as I finished it and walked away from it that that's not going to work. It doesn't fit. So, and you have to, it's kill your darlings, they say. And it helps if you have a really good editor. I had Kendra Levin for this book at Simon & Schuster. She's amazing. But someone who will really hold you accountable and be like, I love you, Sarah, but this book is too long, or I love you, but no, you haven't gotten this note yet, and you need to get it. And we went back and forth quite a bit. And we also had, as I was saying earlier, because this book has these sprayed edges, which Charlie here called spreages, which I think, because they have this beautiful color patina. I don't know what to call it. I didn't even really know what that was. Ombre, thank you.
Gradient.
That it requires a lot of things getting shipped to China to get it done and everything. So we were on this very accelerated schedule because of the sprayed edges. And I hated the sprayed edges back in June and July. I was like, I don't care. Kendra was like, it doesn't matter. We're doing it. So, but now it looks beautiful. So it's like childbirth, you just forget. Oh, that was fine. It wasn't fine. It was really hard at the time.
So thinking about, you mentioned the skeleton that you had in mind. How much of the bones are the same?
That's a good question. The ending is rarely what I plan because I'm not really good at knowing where the book is going. I usually have a sense something's going to happen. all of these pieces are going to come together. And usually my climactic scene is still pretty close, but the books change so much as you're writing them. You kind of are going along, and again, something might happen that comes out of nowhere, and you're like, oh my gosh, that's a really good idea. I need to do that. But that's why the editing process, it's so hard. But I worry these days because there's so much AI and people aren't editing as much, and I need an editor. Left to my own devices, you guys wouldn't want to read what I write, because I'll just kind of go on and on. And again, I'll have a really unlikable character that nobody wants, to be narrating their book. So I think it changes a fair amount. I don't usually I never tell anybody what I'm working on while I'm working on it. Not even my family, I don't talk about the book. And that is honestly from going through a creative writing program in college at UNC, where you just got eviscerated in workshop. You bring in a chapter and people just rip it to shreds in front of you, and it's so demoralizing and humiliating. And people that are like, well, that tree wouldn't be blooming that time of year, that kind of stuff. It's just the kind of stuff that's really going to slow you down when you're just trying to write a book. So that's just become my thing. I have a lot of admiration for people who are in writing groups and show their work and everything, but I got burned too many times at UNC. So
It's nicer now.
Yes, I think so. And when I taught, I didn't allow that. I would say to my students, I always called it the sandwich method. I'm not going to react well if you sit down and tell me immediately something awful, and say something really mean to me. If I say, which dress do you like? And you say, well, that one makes you look terrible. I'm like, well, I'm not going to listen to you anymore. But if you say, that one's not as flattering because the length isn't as good as whatever. So I always call it the sandwich method. You could say 2 nice things and say everything bad you have to say, and then say 2 more nice things. And they would be scratching their heads, coming up with nice things to say. But, there's nobody accepts criticism. It's hard enough to take feedback. But if someone's being vicious about it, you just aren't going to listen. I mean, it's really hard. But I will say I got a good skin out of that. That and waitressing. Those were the 2 things that really, I got more of a thick skin from waitressing than just about anything else.
So thinking about the editing process, and I read this interview that you gave with Regina, your first editor, and you said we couldn't track changes in a Word document if you forced us, and that we're pen and paper and a paper manuscript. Is that still the case now, or have things changed?
I have had to go over to track changes, but I'm not happy about it. I don't like it, and I mess it up every time. Like, I'm the author that messes up the track changes, and that, you know, the copy editor is like, what is this? What happened here? Because it's just not my thing. I did with Regina, we sent manuscripts back and forth, and then you'd get your copy edited manuscripts, which had tons of little Post-its on them, you know. But I'm getting better at it. You know, this is the second book I've done with track changes. And again, Kendra's been very patient with me. She kind of holds my hand and understands that I'm it's not my favorite, but I do see why it works so well. It's like, you know, it is very collaborative, and it's a lot faster, and you don't have to worry about the manuscript getting lost in the mail, which was something we always used to worry about. Like, a copy-edited manuscript was like this precious thing. Everybody had done so much work on it. You didn't want it to get stuck in a post office somewhere. So, but yeah, the technology part of it is not my favorite.
And thinking about things that change people, also change teens, being a teen today. So what is writing young people like now versus your first novel? And what's the same?
Well, I mean, yeah, I think I was close. Obviously, I was closer to it. My first book came out when I was 26. So I had, you know, I wasn't that far away from my teen years. But again, I think it's sticking to what's timeless. Like, the relationships you have with your parents, the relationships you have with your friends, whoever you're attracted to, even something as small as like having a job outside of school and dealing with adults that aren't your parents or teachers, you know. That's the kind of stuff I try to hone in on. I think if you try to keep up with the trends, you try to keep up with the slang, it doesn't work anyway because of the way publishing works. You know, you might be right up to date when the book is written, and then it's 6 months later. And teens are the first to know if you're not cool. Trust me, I am told often I am not cool. You know, I'm not using the proper words or whatever, like the whole 6'7" thing. I'm like, I don't really know what that is. So, you know, I don't need to know. Thank you. At a certain age, it's like, I don't have to keep up with this anymore. But it's always been easy for me to put myself back into that time. I think some of it is because I live here in my hometown, and I still drive past my high school, you know, just about every other day, probably. So it's never too far. And also, high school was like really hard for me. It was not fun. I did not enjoy it, but I did have like a really solid group of friends. And I think a lot of stories came out of that. So I draw from that more than anything else, is sort of those memories. But, you know, I do wonder sometimes, I'm like, it might be time to wrap this up. You know, like maybe it's time to write about people that are beyond high school, which I think would be fun. So after these next 2 books, I think I may try to pivot. I don't know. That's a lot of pressure. I can't take it. But I have written several books that were about girls in their 20s, but nobody has liked them. And by nobody, I mean my agent. So she's always like, no, you know. She was not impressed with any of them. So I have a lot sitting in the closet that are about people in their 20s. But I think I need to do something new at this point.
Okay. So the covers, so beautiful. And a new direction from your older covers.
Yes.
Can you talk about the process, the design process, and your new covers for your older books too?
Yes. Well, the design process, we actually started working on this cover. We had just started revising, so it was really hard to sort of, but that's the way publishing works also. And also we had the sprayed edges, so it was like, we gotta go, you know, all this pressure. So we had a great designer. I've forgotten her last name, but her first name is Lucy, because that's all I ever corresponded with her. And you know, you get sent like 3 or 4 ideas, and usually the first couple of ideas are not great and nobody likes them, and then eventually you get to one. This one was probably around the 2nd or 3rd round of designs that came through, and because so many had switched over to animated covers, you know, which is so interesting. Like when my first books came out back in the 90s, they had animated covers, you know, and then it switched over to more real life because they were trying to look more like contemporary fiction. And now we're back towards, you know, that's the thing about publishing, and especially YA publishing. It's just the pendulum always swings back. But yeah, it's fun to see a different take. And I've always been weird about faces on my covers. Like I've never liked, they used to do these like parts of faces. That was a big trend for a while. But I never liked like an actual face on my book, because I always think that when I read a book, I want to kind of put myself into it, and I don't want to be thinking, about somebody else's face, you know, and I don't want the character to be so obviously drawn for me that I can't picture it myself. But with this one, I don't know, it didn't bother me, and I liked it, and I felt like it had sort of a warmth to it. And but yeah, the original design they sent me was like two pairs of sunglasses, kind of over each other, and kind of like they were I don't know what that was, but it's so hard because everybody has really strong feelings, and we all know that we don't want to judge a book by its cover, but we do, you know. And the worst thing is if you've worked really, really hard on a book and then they want to put a cover on it that you're just like, oh my God, you know, this is awful. So my dad always used to say to me, you know, pick your battles. And so the cover is often the one that I will pick if I have to pick something. You know, I'll let a lot of other stuff go, but if I really don't like a cover, I will make some noise about it. But luckily, I was really lucky with this one. Everybody was very collaborative, and once we landed on this one, we liked it. You know, everybody was happy. So.
So I often think, like, could it be a Sarah Dessen book without a very sweet boy at the center? And we have Ben is awkward. He loves groceries in bulk, vintage T-shirts, and avoiding the limelight. Where did inspiration for his character come from, and who came first, Colin or Ben?
Well, that's the question. Yeah. So Colin came first, and I was going to read a little scene at some point with Colin. And that's the thing, that Colin is Finley's boyfriend when the book begins, and he is super charismatic and very confident. And so I knew that whoever else was going to be sort of vying for her attention and her heart needed to be the total opposite of that, you know. And so what I like about Ben is that he is really awkward, and also that he sort of is open about his awkwardness. Like, I'm really awkward, and I think a lot of times in a really awkward moment you won't acknowledge it, which just makes it more awkward. So, you know, I love that he'll like say something to Finley, and then he's like, I don't know why I just said that. That was so stupid. You know, there's like an honesty to that I find very refreshing and appealing. And, you know, we find out later in the book that Colin is not as confident as, you know, nobody is. But yeah, Colin definitely came first. But that's the thing, like, Colin's one of those people that just like sucks all the energy out of the room. And in order to be with them, you kind of have to just trail along behind them and let them do that. So I wanted Ben to be more of like a slow burner, you know, and that he definitely is.
There's an estate sale that is a major plot point in the book, and there's a lot of conflict around sort of like what gets listed and who gets to keep what. What drew you to include? Are you an estate sale like fan?
I'm not.
Oh,
but I, again, with my extended family, we all live on this peninsula with a river on one side and a bay on the other, and all the houses have been there since like literally the early 1900s. And a lot of the furniture has also been there since and so people are so particular, like, God forbid you want to take some, you know, lamp that is about to electrocute your whole family, you know, to the dump, because people are like, but that was Grandma Jean's favorite lamp, and she used to read under it when she, you know, it's like, there's so much emotion. Like, one of my cousins one time accidentally like broke the washing machine, and it was like the whole family was up in arms, and she was like, I'm sorry, you know. It's like there's so much emotion at stuff, and especially with families, you know. And I think at one point one of the aunts says, you know, it doesn't matter, it's just stuff, you know, this place will always be with you, you'll take it with you whether or not you have this particular break front, you know, or whatever. But my family is definitely like that. I got the reputation, undeserved, I feel, of being the person who throws everything away. Like, you know, the minute I got up there, everyone was like, your mother says you're throwing everything away. And I was like, I'm throwing away things that have been eaten by mice. Like, do you want to keep this blanket that is full of holes? Well, yes, because that was Grandma Jean's blanket, you know, like. And also when you have a small child and everything is a total like fire hazard, and, you know, all these old plugs that you're just waiting for some kid to stick a fork in them, you know, and like burn down the whole house. So it's kind of a metaphor for that family, the modernization of family, and when you become the adult in the family and you suddenly have to be like, I don't want my kid to be chewing on this extension cord, you know, like, can we please get something that's a little bit safer, you know, and then bumping up against all the tradition and like, well, that's not how we do it, kind of thing.
And thinking about like one of the objects that they're like, we're not going to sell is this dollhouse. And what is I know you work with miniatures.
I do when I have time.
So how did you decide to include this in the novel? Why make miniatures? They're so cute.
I know, they're so cute. I had a dollhouse when I was little, and I was really into it. And I think it's where a lot of my storytelling actually began, because I really like to make up stories. Like I had this incredibly complicated family in my dollhouse, and they all had personalities, and it was like sort of where it all started. And things just seem more manageable in miniature. Like I got into it during the pandemic again, like I hadn't for years, but everything when it's smaller and you can just put it out in front of you seems like you can fix it or control it, so there's something to be said for that. And also I just loved the idea of this family, and you have your dollhouse family, and you have this little house, and then the house is such a big part of this book and this family. And the dollhouse in the book is actually made to look just like the house that they're selling. The grandfather made it. So I just love to put things that I'm interested in, but it became a big part of the book, like more than I thought it would be.
And thinking about the grandfather, I think a lot of the characters in this book are deeply flawed, but you also see aspects of their humanity and you learn more. Maybe you don't agree with the choices they made, but you sort of understand how they came to make those choices. Can you talk a little bit about sort of any messages of like forgiveness or growth or sort of growing there?
Yeah. I think it's more acceptance with family. I mean, I think when you get to a certain age, you realize that you're always going to have differences with the people in your family. You're not going to see things the same way. But when you're younger, it's sort of this like scorched earth thing, like, I'm done, and I'm never talking to you people again, or whatever. But then you kind of realize that that's not practical I think the older you get, and also, again, you're seeing people as an adult yourself and being like, oh, like, they were up against a lot of things. This was difficult for them, I think forgiveness becomes easier as you get older, personally. My dad always used to say that Sarah can get a long way on vengeful and bitterness, But that sort of compelled me the way other people were compelled by other things. But I think that, the older I get, I'm sort of softening around my edges a little bit. But yeah, I think with family, again, it's accepting that, you're not all going to see things the same way. And that's really what this book is about. It's like how many different narrators there are for all these stories. And that doesn't mean that any one story is not true. It just means, it's true to you. And somehow you have to find a place in the middle where all those stories overlap enough that you can, stay together and be a family.
I think also thinking about that there's no ending necessarily to these family stories. They just keep going on and on. And I could have hung out in this book forever. Wow. How do you decide when to end the story?
Oh, I'm ready to end, let me tell you. Well, at a certain point, and then this, like, you sort of can, it's like the last part of the roller coaster, you can feel it, you're like tick, 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 and then you're up at the top and you can just see exactly where it's going to go. And so I'm always interested when people say to me, how do you know when to end the book? And I'm like, because I'm always writing towards that, that sort of resolution of, but I appreciate you wanting to hang out, but I knew that I wanted to end in a certain way. I'm not going to spoil it, but, and it seemed like a place where you can sort of tie up all the loose ends. I always like to have things kind of tied up and everybody happy at the end, There was a period in like the early 2000s where my books were like the only books with happy endings, and I remember the booksellers being like, it's so nice to read a book that doesn't leave me depressed, And I don't want to be depressed. If I put a lot of time into reading a book, I don't want to leave just hating everybody and, being down. That's just not the kind of book I want to read. So I always try to end with hope if I can,
So in the past, you've mentioned your first 4 books are sort of like a quartet.
Yes.
Do you think this book belongs to the middle? Is there a new trio? Like, how do you position this book among them all?
I think this being more of a trio, I always say it's like the Taylor Swift eras, the first 4 books were sort of, very close together, and they were smaller books with not as much happening. And then this lullaby kind of just took me in a totally different direction. And then I always think of Along for the Ride as being the first book I wrote as a mom, so a lot that changed another way. But it's the setting too with this, because my last book, the rest of the story was set at the lake. This is a lake book. I have one more lake book that I would like to be the next book. But the next book is set in Lakeview, the one that's coming out a year from now. And if you've read the other books, it's if you know that Club Bendo that's in the books, that's kind of like the Cat's Cradle. It's about a girl whose brother owns Bendo, and her sort of coming and getting involved in that world of it's kind of like a Cat's Cradle in fiction. But so I think these last three, they tend to, then there's a whole gap in the middle. I don't know. And the thing is, I always think of the books as being completely in order, but nobody reads them in order. I think very rarely has somebody read them in the actual order that they're written. So it really doesn't matter where they are in the,
What would you name your current era?
Oh, God, I don't know. Grateful. Just happy to be here, seriously. There were some dark days where I was like, I remember being on the phone with my agent. We had been rejected by multiple publishing houses because everybody wanted me to do something else. Everybody was like, well, will she write a fantasy series? Will she do romantasy? Will she do this? Exactly, that's what I said. Like, nobody wants me to do that. It's going to be embarrassing for all of us. So we were just having to sort of wait until, again, the pendulum swung back. But I remember this one day after we'd been rejected a bunch. I've been with the same agent since the very beginning. And I said to her, is it over? And she was like, we're not there yet. And I was like, okay. Because I was like, just be honest with me. If I need to career pivot at my age, just let me know now if I need to go figure it out. So the fact that I'm sitting here, this just feels amazing, because there were a lot of days when I wasn't sure this was going to happen. So thank you all for coming out for that. Thank you.
Okay, I prepared some very fast questions.
Okay, I like those.
What is on your dream breakfast sandwich?
I like your basic breakfast sandwich. I like a bagel, egg, bacon, cheese.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe avocado if you're feeling a little fancy, but mostly just the basics for me.
Okay. What is the strangest thing you found yourself Googling in the name of research?
In the name of research. Oh my gosh. That's a really good question. Gosh. So I knew you were going to ask me some things that were going to flummox me. I have Googled weird things. I'm trying to think of, like, with this book, what it might have been.
I was Googling the plants.
Yeah, well, the plants I all made up. I made up a lot of the plants. So the Municus flower, which is mentioned in this, the Municus is the river behind my house in Cape Cod. So the Municus flower is not a real flower. I like to make things up because I think it sort of makes it so that it's not set. Then nobody has an opinion on it. It's like why all the music and Just Listen is fake music, because people are so passionate about music that if I put a band that somebody didn't like, then it was gonna, I think the most recent thing that I was Googling was what is a road trip that you would take from North Carolina to California? Because the book, another book I'm working on is sort of a road trip book, which I'm not sure it's gonna work because I realized that you don't have a lot of good setting in road trip books unless you just really don't have them in the car that much. It's really hard to write about people in a car a lot of the time. It's kind of boring. So I think that was the most, how long would it take to drive from here to California, and where would you be stopping?
There are a few Bravo-esque shows in the book.
Yes.
What Bravo shows should we be watching?
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm a real Housewives person. I have sort of pulled away from it in the last few years, but for my 50th birthday, I'm dating myself here. I had a Housewives themed birthday party, and I flipped a table at my birthday. My friend Lori, if you know Teresa from Housewives of New Jersey, she famously flipped this table at this party and screamed and everything. And I always wanted to flip a table, but I'm very neat. And my husband is always like, "Who's going to clean that up?" Like that's all he thinks about. Like when you see people in movies that smash a vase, and he's like, "Somebody's going to have to sweep that up." Who's going to do that? So my friend Lori set out this whole table for me. This was during the pandemic. We were all outside, and she put champagne glasses on it and cheap champagne and everything. And then I got to flip it, and it was very satisfying. So I like the Housewives. I'm not watching it as much as I used to, but that was I'm very fluent in Housewives. If there was ever a trivia night that featured that, I think I would do pretty well.
What was your tagline at your birthday?
Oh, I don't even think I had a tagline. Oh, my birthday. I don't think I did that. I was probably just I don't even know. I'm flipping the table. I was so distracted by the table flipping. It was like I couldn't even. Yes, it was really, really fun. It was nice, and I think I had these little cups made up that said "Real Housewives of Chapel Hill," and I gave them to all of my friends, and so we still have those sort of floating around. So
I'm like picturing you and like Jordan, Bill Belichick's girlfriend, like as the real. Who would make up the Real Housewives?
If there was a real, I don't think I would fit in, but I would watch that. I can't imagine. It wouldn't be me, but I would totally be there. I'd be in the background. Like, that's what I want. I want to be one of those people that like gets invited to one of the parties and just sits there when everyone's fighting and is just kind of eating the cheese and crackers. That's what I want.
Okay, last book that made you laugh.
Oh, what's the last book that made me laugh? I've been reading a lot lately because it brings down my anxiety, my collective anxiety. Well, I just finished Emma Straub's American Fantasy, which is about cruises and boy bands and just completely, out there. It's about a woman who goes on one of these 90s boy band cruises, not voluntarily. Her sister buys tickets and then her sister can't go. So she has to go and she's not even that big of a fan of the band. And there were some great moments in that one. So I would say that was very enjoyable. And I recommend it. It's a great summer book.
So there's a fictional there's a wedding in this book. Favorite fictional wedding?
Oh, fictional wedding, gosh. I don't know. I'm not going to say any of the Real Housewives because I don't think that would be good. Well, I love Love Actually. I love the wedding that sort of starts that, and Keira Knightley is just so beautiful, coming down the aisle in that. I really like that. And when any wedding that was on like 90210, which was like I don't think anybody ended up getting married at the end of that one. Dylan and Kelly never got married. See, I'm dating myself with this. These are the problem with these rapid fire questions. You ask me questions I've already been asked a million times. I'm really good at answering them.
And then I know that you love your hummingbirds.
I do.
Any tips for people who are trying to grow their hummingbird community?
Well, you don't want to buy like the red syrup because you don't need to do that. Just make your own sugar water at home. And I do like 4 cups of water and 1 cup of sugar, and just put it out and wait for them. I mean, I don't know what it is about our house, but we do have a lot of hummingbirds coming through. Like they're dive bombing like they are in the book. But they're just so magical. Like I've always just thought hummingbirds, and I'd never seen a hummingbird be still until I started to put feeders, because you always see them in motion, but when you have a feeder, they'll actually land and sit there for a second. And they always look so exhausted. I think that's why I like them. I can relate. They're just like, trying to just take a moment to catch their breath.
Okay, switching out of rapid fire, but just thinking about, it's graduation time. We have a lot of college seniors who are maybe on their 100th job application.
Right.
They're looking at a change of plans, or you maybe have high school seniors who, wait lists haven't panned out the way they might have hoped.
Right.
What kind of advice do you have for them about changing plans and being open to it?
Well, gosh, I think it's a lot easier when you're my age and you've sort of seen that things can work out. I do think that things work out not always the way that you want them to, or that you could ever imagine them working out. And a lot of it is patience. Sometimes it takes time for things to come together. Again, like I had 7 years of sitting around my house, wondering if my career was over. And there were many times where I was like, why is this happening to me? But I think there was a lot I needed to do in those 7 years to sort of get myself back to where the right place was. So I would just say, just be gentle on yourself and have some faith that you will end up where you're supposed to be. But again, it may be a place that you never would have seen, and that's really what this book is about, is like, you can lay out a path all you want, but where you end up is often, in the end, where you were supposed to be, even if it's somewhere that didn't even cross your mind.
It's so beautiful.
Oh.
And I think such nice advice for young, it's hard to feel like you should have everything figured out.
Oh my gosh. And especially this group, like I was saying, my daughter's a senior, and having so much pressure, the college application process. Oh my gosh, you guys. it's grueling, and nobody tells you. Well, my friend Lee tried to tell me, but I didn't want to believe her. I was like, oh no, it'll be fine. Just really, really hard, and trying to find the right place. And again, at 18, supposed to know exactly what you want to do with your life and exactly where you want to go. And I didn't know anything when I was 18. You know, I couldn't. Well, I also went to school and dropped out 2 months later, but that's a whole other story. So, you know, I was not one of these kids that was poised to take over the world at 18. I was like barely holding it together. But I think there is a lot of pressure. And I think, again, we just need to be kind to ourselves as much as we can and know that everybody's moving at a different pace. You know, like, don't live laterally. Keep your eye on your race, because comparing yourself to other people, that's how you just will wear yourself out super fast.
I think that just we're always moving. I tell my students, like, the job I have now teaching, which is amazing, but when I hit the 2-year mark, that was the longest I'd ever stayed at a job in my life. And, you know, I've been at work for quite a while now, and there is no, like, 10, 15 years solo direct line plan in a way.
And I think that's another thing, like this generation coming up, and, you know, obviously the few years ahead of them, it's so much harder. You know, I mean, when I was graduating and stuff, it was sort of expected that you would do as well as your parents or better, and, you know, you would go and you would buy a house, and this would happen. And I mean, economically and just with the way the world is, it's a lot harder to get your life started these days than it used to be. So, you know, I'm glad my daughter has 4 more years of, you know, higher education before she has to start applying to the job market. But, you know, I think, and that's what these years, you know, from teaching college. I mean, when I taught at UNC, I'd have students, and there's so much pressure. You come in, it's like, where are you from? What's your major? You know? And half the people more than half would change their majors by junior year and evolve. And that's what you're supposed to do in college. You know, you're not supposed to be the same person. You're supposed to do different things and try different stuff and evolve, you know?
And just, I think it's so wild to think failure is not bad.
Right.
That it is a moment of growth.
Yes. And we need to fail. You need to fail. You need to get knocked under behind a few times and get the wind knocked out of you to also appreciate where you are. But nobody has it easy. And the people that you see on social media that are saying that they have it easy and it looks like their lives are perfect, they're the ones that are the most messed up, I swear to you. You know, it takes a lot to keep that facade going. So, you know, I think a little kindness and a little patience is key. 10 more minutes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Should you do a reading?
Should I read or should I take questions? I feel like questions are really fun. Do you want me to read? I don't even know if people read. Yes? Read to us. I don't know if people read anymore. It's been 7 years. Okay. This is a 4-minute reading, so we will still have time for a couple of questions. And I know because I timed myself today. I do not want to come up here and read having no practice whatsoever. Okay, so this is from very early on in the book, and this is basically the first time that Colin and Finley meet. And she is new at school, and she comes into a history class and ends up being paired with him for an exercise. And I think that's all you need to know. So, okay, Ms. Hernandez said, grab a piece of paper and a pen. I'm going to mark 10 minutes on the clock. When I say go, I want you to list all 50 states. A girl behind us with straight black hair and glasses raised her hand. Ms. Hernandez, is this a competition? It is. First team to get all the states within the time limit gets extra credit points. Do you really think that's wise, that everyone here can, you know, handle it? There was a flurry of laughter, although I wasn't exactly sure of the joke myself. Then I realized that Mrs. Hernandez was smiling, looking at my partner. Colin, can you do this without having a breakdown, she asked. No, another girl said and snorted. That was last year, Colin said, and it was clear he was in on the joke, that this was a thing. And I might add a possibly biased call on the part of the official. I was the official, Mrs. Hernandez said, and it was the wrong answer. Last year, Colin said again, and everyone laughed. I'm a new man now, please proceed. Competitive Colin, the girl with glasses said, we'll all be praying for your partner, poor thing. Oh, Finley's gonna wipe the floor with you guys, he replied confidently. I won't even have to help. What? I thought. Go, yelled Mrs. Hernandez, and the room was suddenly buzzing. Colin immediately wrote down our home state. 49 to go. What's our strategy? Are you really that competitive? No, he said, writing down California, Oregon, and Washington. Maybe. Yes. How are you on the Midwest? Not as good as you think I am, I said. Put down Hawaii and Alaska. My feeling is that you have a killer instinct. I have a sense of these things. He was writing down states quickly as he spoke. All of New England, the Deep South, Texas, the Gulf. Do the Norths and Souths, Dakotas and Carolinas, I said. I noticed the girl with glasses was listening to us and grabbed a pencil, gesturing for him not to talk. He shot me a thumbs up, then pushed his desk closer, so we were right next to each other, making room for me to add to the list. Instead, I found an empty spot on the page and started to draw a map. You are brilliant, he scribbled in between adding Virginia, Maryland, and Tennessee. Flattered, I started filling in the mid-Atlantic states, then moved west. I got hung up for a second on Arkansas and Michigan, but rallied. All around us, people were shouting states, but we were stealthy, silent except for the scraping of his pencil and mine. W's and M's, I scribbled, having run out of sure things I knew in the middle of the map. Montana, Wyoming, Wisconsin, Minnesota, he added. Then he looked at me, eyebrows raised. I snapped my fingers. Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Utah, I wrote. 4 corners, he said. Nice. Shh, I swatted him with my hand. Oh, sorry, he said. I could feel him watching me as I bent my head back over the paper, thinking. 5 minutes to go, announced Miss Hernandez. Colin looked back at the girls behind us. Keep your head in the game, I said. You want them to have bragging rights? Another smile. I might just love you, he announced broadly. Just saying. I couldn't dwell on this. Okay, maybe I did for a second. Because we only had 3 left to go. Come on, I said under my breath, running my pencil over the makeshift map. Colin was biting his lip, thinking as well. Indiana, he wrote. Illinois. 1 left. We looked at each other. Suddenly, nothing mattered more to me than remembering this one last state. There was a squeal from the girls behind us. Colin looked at me. They're double checkers, he said. They've got it. There's no... Idaho, I wrote down. I stuck up my hand. We're done. We have a possible winner, Mrs. Hernandez said, walking over to us, pending my check. We're done too, one of the girls behind us shouted. Too late, Kamara, Colin hollered back. But I was only focused on Mrs. Hernandez, running a finger down our list of states. When she reached the final one, she looked at me. He's going to be insufferable now, she told me. You know that, right? But I didn't care, wasn't thinking about that one bit as she declared us the champs. Some people were clapping, some booing, but all I could focus on was Colin, grinning wildly at me as he held up his hand for a high five. When I pressed my hand to his, he wrapped his fingers around mine, giving them a quick squeeze. Way to go, Idaho, he said. In all the noise and commotion, I heard him clear as day, and then I squeezed back. So that's Colin. And that's what I mean, like that kind of thing is so fun to write because it's so fast and, you know, you have all this stuff happening. I love nothing more than a scene where 2 people are having to do something, some kind of activity, you know, and also have a conversation. But I did want to take a few questions. I don't know, we don't have a ton of time, but I see your hand. Yes.
Hi, I was wondering when you need to fill your cup and refill your inspiration, what do you like to do? Where do you go or listen to? Read? How do you fill your cup?
I read a lot these days, to be honest. Like my anxiety started to get kind of out of hand. I think a lot of people can relate. So I started to read, because reading is like the one thing that will calm my brain, because my brain can't race when I'm reading. So I read a lot. I'm always got a book going. And I also really like television. Like I'm the first person to tell you, like at the end of a long writing day when I'm really tired and drained, I like nothing more than to get on the couch, maybe with an adult beverage, and, you know, watch a show. Right now, I'm really into the show Rooster with Steve Carell on HBO. If you're watching that, it's about a writer. So I do that, and, you know, it's a lot of just sort of sitting quietly as I get older. You know, I writing is really draining for me. So a lot of times if I just need to get out, and if I'm stuck, that's when getting out and going and just running errands. Sometimes I have my best ideas when I'm at the CVS, you know, waiting in line. I learned over this past 7 years that sort of obsessing and staring at something does not make it come any easier. So you kind of got to get out and about, think about something else. Yes.
So you've talked about how it's been 7 years, and how are you just feeling about, you know, you thought it was over, and now you're going on a book tour again for the first time in 7 years. How are you just feeling?
I feel very lucky to be doing all this again. Because I wasn't sure it was going to happen. I'm a little scared because I'm 7 years older, and, you know, it's a lot. It's an 11 days tour and, you know, events every day and everything. But I'm also really excited because this is the fun part in a lot of ways. Like sitting alone in a room, writing and then editing is not necessarily fun, but getting to come out and see people. And that's the thing, when you write, you don't really get to see people reading, you know, or you don't really get to talk to people that are reading your books. And so it was really lonely, I think, over the last few years, because that was the part that was missing. It's always like you work on a book and then you go out and talk about the book. and not being able to talk about the book and not being able to talk to people, that was really hard. So I'm just really happy to be here. I'm super grateful.
We're happy you're here too.
Oh, well, thank you. It's such a love fest at my readings. You're familiar too. You've been here before. There are a few people, like the girl in the white, she's not in a white coat, but the first time, right there. How many years ago was that?
Oh, God. I mean, you were reading at Chapel Hill. I was in college.
Yeah.
I
was
am a decade, I'm not going to say it.
Yeah.
Right?
She was wearing a white coat, and she, every time she has come since, she's like, I was the girl in the white coat. Totally remember. Okay, another question?
So in your previous books, sometimes you've had characters from earlier books make an appearance. Did you keep that in this new book? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
It's not as obvious, but there are some mentions here and there.
Okay.
And it's always, that started because everybody always wanted sequels, because YA is really good with sequels. A lot of people do sequels. I never do sequels because I'm usually sick of everything having to do with my book by the time I'm done. But so many people wanted them that I started doing this kind of Easter egg where people pop up. And it's also from living in my hometown, because that's how it works. You know, like you'll be at the gas station and there's your middle school crush, you know, at the pump next to you. Oh God, you know, like let's not look at each other. Let's act like we don't know each other. So yeah, there are a couple of little mentions. Not as obvious, but there are definitely.
Well, I
ones
love
there.
that you brought Scarlet back in whichever one that was.
In this lullaby. That was the
in this
first
lullaby,
one. Yeah, in
yes.
this lullaby, because Someone Like You was my second book, and I had so many people wanting to know what happened to Scarlet
Yes.
after that book. So I just popped her into this lullaby. So I always tell people, like, in my mind, everyone's happy and everyone's still together. You know, why wouldn't they be? You know, like except for, you know, someone like Jason Talbot, which is another character who has like had many incarnate. I know, boo. But you need to go read What Happened to Goodbye, because Jason has like a whole plot point there where you realize he, like Colin, is not. Sometimes the people that you think are the most successful are struggling the most. So, how are we doing on time?
I mean, we're at time, but if you want to take maybe one more.
One more question. Yes.
I know you love your happy endings. Do you ever write like sad or bad stories and put it in your delete folder to just like vent?
I mean, there have definitely been some dark scenes and everything. You know, I think you can have a happy ending. You can have stuff working up to the happy ending that isn't quite so happy. I mean, if you've read my book Dreamland, which is like, it sort of sticks out on its own. It's on its own little island because it's like the darkest of all of my books. And I recently listened to it because I was doing this thing for a domestic violence charity, and I was talking about it, and the book came out such a long time ago. So I bought a copy of my own book on audio, and then I was like driving around town listening to it while I ran my errands, which is the most like self-centered thing. But I was really worried they were going to ask me a question that I, couldn't remember, because this was 1999 when this book came out. But yeah, it's sort of when people say, "Do you ever write dark?" I'm like, go read that book, because it's definitely it's the dark one, but it's kind of in its own. And I think it's a happy ending too. I mean, I think Caitlin at the end gets where she's supposed to be. So, all right. Well, we're going to do signing. If you have questions you wanted to ask and couldn't ask them, I'll be there. All right.
Just give a little bit of instruction.
Okay.
Thank you guys so much. Well, first I'd like to welcome anyone who wants to get in the front of the line and has any accessibility needs to go ahead and head that way first. So you can do that now. And in a moment, I'm going to call everybody else. When I do call everyone, we have like 150 people here. So if everybody joins the line, it might take a minute. So just hold a little bit of patience and watch for people trying to get by you in line to reach the bathroom to the exits. Okay, but that said, we have some orange dots that'll kind of shape the line, and my associate Maggie, who you met at the beginning of the talk, will help you as you line up to get your books signed and take some photos. All your books are already signed, so this is just for personalization, photos, talking to Sarah, asking that last question. So yeah, I'll go ahead and call everybody now. You're welcome to wait and join the line later, or go ahead now, and Maggie will help you. You can exit from any of the 3 exits. Just push those buttons.
over there.
Okay.
We're good.
Great, congratulations. Oh, thank you. It's great meeting you. I have like 2 more weeks and then we have our senior trip. Then I'm done. Yay!
Hey, good to see you. So good to see you. Congratulations. I'm so excited for you. I didn't know if you'd be in your red sweatshirt tonight or not.
I almost was.
You thought about it.